Oh, welcome back to the Brother Blog. If you haven't already, take a look at some of our other videos. Check out our channel. Today is our final installment of the Top 25 Preseason Preview Series. So we'll start with number 21. Go ahead.
Number 21 is the Georgia Bulldogs, and they return A.J. Green. He's their biggest playmaker at wide receiver, but there's a couple of questions about who's going to throw him the ball. They don't really have any quarterbacks that they are looking at who can really bring in the type of throwing that they need in order to give him the ball. But their offensive line should be solid. That's a plus. Their defensive line, though, is questionable on the other side of the ball. You look at some holes they have to fill over there. On the bright side, though, of the defense, they have linebacker Justin Houston returning, and he was an All-SEC pick last season. So hopefully he can continue to build his productivity and give that team a better side on the defensive ball because they're going to need that with the lack at quarterback position. So with the line solid, A.J. Green back, defensive line questions, though. You look at Georgia and you think they haven't really done much since the loss of Matt Stafford and no Sean Moreno. I see Georgia this year 9-3. This is because they basically have 4 hard games. These are Week 3, they play Arkansas at home. Week 9, Florida at home. Week 11, at Auburn. And Week 13, Georgia Tech at home. I see them losing all these games except at Auburn. I think they get the win at Auburn. I think that's their win. But they do lose to Arkansas, Florida, and Georgia Tech to put Georgia at 9-3 this year.
You know, I think being at home in 3 of those 4 tough games is a big key for the Bulldogs. But Arkansas, very good team this year. I really like them. I think they could pull off the upset maybe, but I don't see that happening. Same with Week 9. Week 11, I actually see the Bulldogs pulling off a win at Auburn. It's a rivalry game. And Week 13, Georgia Tech, I think Georgia can pull off a big upset since it's a rivalry game. So I also have the Bulldogs going 9-3 with losses to Arkansas, Florida, and Auburn. So the next team is the number 22 ranked Oregon State Beavers. And obviously the key for the Beavers this year is they return Jacquizz Rodgers, the running back, who had 1,440 rushing yards last season. He's already a Heisman hopeful. And another minus, though, this time is the passing game. And even though they have James Rodgers, Jacquizz's brother, and Jacquizz can sweep out of the backfield every now and then, the quarterback is a big question mark. I mean, they got Katz. He's their last option. All of their other guys, they had 3 big names, and they all either went pro or got transferred or they got caught in some type of Mistoli issue.
Yeah.
The front 4 on defense is very solid this season for the Beavers. The secondary is a big issue. They got to work on that. I think if they can get this defense built up, Oregon State could potentially be competing for a national title. Definitely a Pac-10 title this season.
Yeah.
The 4 tough games this year are Week 1, Boise State, or Week 1 TCU, Week 4 at Boise State, Week 7 at Washington, and Week 14 the Civil War, Oregon. Week 1 TCU, you know, I see TCU. They got a shot at potentially busting the BCS this season. I don't think they can do it, though. They lost Jerry Hughes, great defensive end. All they got left is Andy Dalton, and he's not that great. Boise State, Week 4, I see this being a loss for the Beavers just because, you know, Kellen Moore, he's a great quarterback, and Boise State always finds ways to win, especially when they're playing teams that are good. You think back to the Oregon game last season. You know, most people were like, you know, Boise's got no one anymore. But they pulled it out of the hat, and what do you know?
They always win.
Yep, they always find ways to win. So I like Boise State in that game. Week 7 at Washington. I think that if Oregon State can win both these games, then Week 7 at Washington is going to be a big game because Washington has Jake Locker. They could potentially be pulling off an upset since they're on the road. So I see Oregon State also losing that game. And Week 14 is the Civil War, and this probably, again, will determine the Pac-10 title. I see Oregon State winning it this season. So 10-2 for the Beavers this year. That's my prediction.
I see, to your point, Oregon State, Jacquizz Rodgers is the key. No passing game, though. I think they can beat TCU in Week 1. I'm not sure it's a pretty big toss-up due to the lack at the quarterback position, but I think they beat TCU. Boise State, definite loss. Washington, I think, will be a close one, especially since it's at Washington and Jake Locker can really do some damage. But, I think they'll win that one too. I mean, they're a very good team. I think Oregon, though, that's a big toss-up. I'm going to go. When I talked about Oregon, I went with Oregon State, but you look at it, I mean, I think I'll still go with Oregon State. I think that's another toss-up game, just like the TCU game. So I'll put them at 11-1, but they could also be just as good a team and end up 9-3. Our next team is the number 23 Auburn Tigers, and they have some questions at quarterback. They now bring in Cam Newton, who was a junior college quarterback. He was at Florida and then was kicked off Florida, and now he's coming back to Auburn. And he's a bit of a dual threat sort of QB, but he's going to have to perform in order for them to have success in the SEC. You need a quarterback. The ground game looks solid, so look for defenses to stack up and defend the run game and really test Newton to pass the ball. But the loss of defensive end Antonio Coleman is definitely painful because he led the SEC in sacks and tackles for loss last year. So you have to look, how are they going to replace him? The good news is it looks like Auburn can replace him successfully. Their front four should be very solid on the defensive side of the ball. Not as good, obviously, with the Coleman loss, but they'll be good enough to hold strong there. However, there is questions with the rush defense, which ranked 11th in the SEC last year, which is pretty, terrible. So the rush defense is going to have to, really, really improve for them to compete with teams like Alabama, Georgia, Arkansas throws the ball, but I mean, a lot of SEC teams are more pounded in your face kind of teams. So the rush defense has to find success in order for them to have a good year. All in all, Auburn has a lot of tough games. Week 3, Clemson at home. Week 7, Arkansas at home. Week 8, LSU at home. Week 9, at Ole Miss, Jeremiah Masoli. Week 11, Georgia at home. Week 13, Bama at home. You look at the schedule. You look at Auburn's loss of a returning quarterback, and having a returning quarterback is key in college football. When you think about it, it's really a difference maker for every team. Yeah, and just the experience. But I see Auburn at 7-5 this year. I think they can beat Clemson in Week 3. I think that they could lose, but I'm going to give them that win. I think SEC, ACC, I think the SECs, they'll smash it in their mouth and everything. Arkansas in Week 7, that's a loss. I think they'll lose to LSU in Week 8. And then I think they'll also lose in Week 9 at Ole Miss. So that's 3 straight losses. That'll really put them in a hole. Then Week 11, Georgia at home. I see that also being a loss. And Bama in Week 13, that's a definite loss too. I mean, Mark Ingram's just going to tear it up out there. So that puts them with 5 losses at a 7-5 team this year. That's what I think. And what are your thoughts?
The Clemson game, I really think Clemson can win this game. I mean, Kyle Parker came back. That's huge. He's got the ability to run, sort of like Cam Newton. Yeah. Cam says that he's sort of a quarterback that can get out of trouble if he has to, but really he's a dual-threat quarterback. Week 7, Arkansas. They got him at home. That's key, but I still think Ryan Mallett tears him to shreds. Week 8, LSU. LSU's a powerhouse defense. They like to run the football, so this Auburn defense will struggle with that. I think LSU wins that game. Week 9, at Ole Miss, Jeremiah Masoli loves to run the football. I think that's a definite loss, too. Week 11, Georgia. I think that Auburn can win this football game just because it's at home, and neither of the two teams are very good this season. Week 13, Alabama. I really think this is a potential upset. I don't think it's going to happen, but I think if you go back to last season, Auburn, Alabama, 26-21, Alabama won on, I think it was like a touchdown with a minute to go, and I mean, that was on the road at Alabama, so I really think with Cam Newton, there's a potential chance at an upset, but I don't think it will happen. I also have the Auburn Tigers going 7-5. The 24th ranked team in the country is the Utah Utes. The key for them is obviously Matt Asta. Can't really pronounce it.
It's like Asta.
Asta. Very good running back. He returns. Jordan Wynn. He seems like a pretty good quarterback. He could lead this team to another BCS berth like they did in 2004-2008.
With Brian Johnson and Alex Smith, yeah.
Yep. But the receiver core, it has some issues. They got to replace David Reed, who had 1,188 yards. He led his conference in receiving, so that's going to be an issue for them. The front four on defense is very solid, though, like Oregon State. But another thing, like Oregon State, is they struggle with that secondary. They got to get that down, especially at safety. If they get that down, I think we could see Utah in a BCS position yet again. Week 1 versus Pittsburgh is obviously a big game to them, but Deion Lewis, I think he's a great running back. Even with that front four very solid, I think Deion Lewis can run over this Utah Utes defense. Week 9 versus TCU, Andy Dalton loves to throw the football. He can tear this secondary apart, and I really like him, in this game. So TCU, I also have them winning that game. Week 10 at Notre Dame. This is going to be a tough game, a close game, but I think that, Utah's going to want it, especially after losing to TCU. So they're going to take their vengeance out on the Fighting Irish. And I like Utah going 10-2 this season.
Okay, well, I see Utah, they haven't really been as big a deal since Brian Johnson. When they had Brian Johnson, they beat Alabama in the Sugar Bowl, which a lot of people overlook, Alabama won the national title. I mean, that was a big, big win. I think Utah was a very good team that year. So the return of that running back, to your point, is big because he was on the team back then. But even with that, you look at the Pittsburgh game, I don't think they can beat Deion Lewis. I don't think they can slow him down. You look at Week 9 versus TCU. And this game really will decide who's going to be the BCS buster, TCU or Utah. Who are you going to look at to be that BCS buster? Boise State's obviously a key pick, and everyone's going to pick them. But you look at that game. And I think that, Utah can pull it off. But in the end, I don't think they're going to. I think TCU is too good. And they're coming off a BCS berth last year. I think they get the win. And to your point, I think they beat Notre Dame. So 10-2 for TCU also. Exact same. Or Utah. 10-2 for Utah. Exact same prediction. So the number 25 team, the West Virginia Mountaineers. And they returned 17 starters, including running back Noel Devine, which is huge. He's their playmaker. However, the passing game, huge questions. QB questions. They don't have a returning starter, Wide receiver questions. They don't really have a strong wide receiving core. So those two combined just basically, dig the grave for the passing game. So they do return their free safety, Robert Sands, who had 5 picks and 8 pass breakups last year. So he could be a big playmaker out there, free safety. And they also have Brandon Hogan, who was an all Big East cornerback. So the secondary looks strong with those 2 players. And they run a 3-3-5 defense, and the front 3 will be outstanding. All 3 players look to have, all Big East caliber. So their defense will be strong and hopefully can make up for the passing game, and Noel Devine can hopefully be big. Their tough games, Week 4 at LSU, Week 9 at UConn, Week 11 Cincinnati at home, Week 13 at Pittsburgh. That's a big game. And Week 14, Rutgers. Now, I see West Virginia this year at 9-3. I think they lose that LSU game in Week 4. I think they lose the Cincinnati game in Week 11. And that puts them in Week 13 at Pittsburgh. That could be a big game for that Big East title since they'll only have one conference loss. I actually have West Virginia beating Pittsburgh. I think they pull it off. Even though it's at Pittsburgh, I think that the defense for West Virginia can slow down Deion Lewis. I think they could do it. And if they do, I think they beat Pittsburgh. However, the following week in Week 14, I have them losing to Rutgers. I think that's an upset. Rutgers is a sleeper team in the Big East this year. They have an outstanding defense that's really overlooked. And I think they beat Pittsburgh. They're all high and mighty, and then I think they get knocked off. Like in one of those crazy years.
Well, you go to the LSU game. At LSU, I really don't think West Virginia can pull this off. Noel Devine's a great running back, though. He could really tear apart any defense. But I think LSU still finds ways to slow him down. Week 9 at UConn. To go back to the game last year, UConn almost pulled off the win. But it's at UConn this year. I still think that, West Virginia can pull it off. Next game, Week 11, Cincy. I still think that West Virginia can win this game as well. Week 13 at Pittsburgh. Like you said, Big East title can be on the line. But Deion Lewis, I really like him this season. I think that Pittsburgh still finds a way to win, even if he gets slowed down. Week 14, Rutgers. To your point, Rutgers is a good sleeping team, but I don't see, a victory for Rutgers. So, 10-2 there.
All right. Well, thanks for watching, and feel free to check out our other videos. That concludes our top 20, top 25 preview.